Good afternoon. Welcome to this presentation, which will be about teaching adults and something that I consider to be a manageable challenge as I've been teaching adults for the past 20 years. Now, what we're going to talk about today is, first of all, we're going to look at some motivational characteristics of adults. And then we're going to link these characteristics to certain suggestions for activities, especially for adults. Now, starting with the opportunities for Greek teachers of English, or in other words, in what sort of educational context can we teachers here in Greece teach adults? And first of all, you've got undergraduate and postgraduate students that can be in the public university or in private colleges, in foundation courses, in exam preparation classes, pre-sessional courses in the UK. That's one of my experiences teaching adults. Then, moving away from students, we've got business people who need to improve their English, or people in other professions like doctors, pilots, nurses, any kind of profession that actually needs ESP, English for specific purposes. And of course, there are those adults who just want to learn or improve their English for personal desire or interest with no specific target in mind. Because I see that the audience includes people from outside Greece. Okay, the title here says that these are the opportunities for Greek teachers, but this does not limit to Greek teachers alone. Any kind of teacher all around the world can have the opportunity to teach adults in the same context. Now, some common characteristics of adults, and here we're going to be looking at some studies. First of all, let's start with the cognitive characteristics of adults, and let's start with a myth. The myth says that adult students are generally more ineffective as language learners than younger students because the latter have better cognitive functions. Well, the reality of that is that, okay, yes, younger students may be better at acquiring pronunciation, for example, but otherwise, adults are perfectly able to reach high levels of proficiency in a foreign language. And in a moment, you will see what ammunition, let's say, they have that the younger learners do not have. Okay, so their ammunition. Adults have greater cognitive capabilities and conceptual complexity. They have a longer attention span and the ability to engage with abstract thought. They have a more developed understanding of how language works, which means they are familiar with the more advanced elements of grammar, although they may not remember all the grammatical phenomena from their mother language. Again, they're quite used to them. They are more familiar with structure, punctuation, and spelling. Also, they're usually more accurate and thus more likely to acquire solid knowledge. However, adults, especially those who are working, or you might even have adults who are working and raising a family, they may exhibit fatigue. And what that translates into is lower energy level, which in turn may limit their memory span and may make their reaction time longer. Now, these were the cognitive characteristics. What about their attitudinal characteristics, and more specifically, what about their motivation? Well, this is where adults excel. They have a sound reason for studying English, and that is their primary motivation, be it for work or for studies or for mere pleasure. They know exactly why they want to study English. It's not because mom and dad say so. They're highly motivated from the beginning of the instructional process so as to improve their self-esteem and reach their personal goals. They're able to sustain their motivation, which is very important, for a longer period by holding on to a distant goal. They're more cooperative. They have more learning experience behind them. So that means that they have well-developed learning strategies and they can be more independent as learners. However, their past learning experiences may, be an asset, but they also might be a limitation. How? Because they shape their past learning experiences may shape their expectations of the learning process now. And the problem here lies with adults who decide to go back to studying English at a, let's say, later age, which means that their past learning experiences methodologically may belong to more, let's say, obsolete methodological approaches, and they might expect to see the same approaches nowadays. So they might, that might come as a surprise. Another factor that has to do with the past learning experiences, and this was my experience in the pre-sessionals in the UK, they might be coming from a totally different educational background. For example, in the University of Liverpool, when I was teaching the pre-sessional, my students were mostly Chinese. And the Chinese educational system has nothing to do with the British one. In the sense, especially when it comes to the interaction between the teacher and the learner, and the independence of the learner. So at the beginning, there was this problem because their past experiences shaped what they expected to find in the UK. And this might lead them sometimes to become more critical towards the new context of instruction. Not always. For example, with my Chinese students in the UK, it was a happy ending because they actually liked the UK system much more than the Chinese one. So they actually adapted very, very well. However, I have had that, this, let's say, criticism from adults who had one thing in mind from their past years in learning, and they wanted to have the same many years afterwards. In addition, another problem with adults is their anxieties, their insecurities, their fears, and they don't only come from their everyday life, they also stem from the fact that they're returning to school. So that might create some level of anxiety. This might make them less confident in their intellectual abilities. If you have ever taught adults, it's the usual question, but can I learn English at this age? And this might result in feelings of inadequacy in relation to other people around them, which means especially if you've got adults together with teenage learners, or if you've got the older adults with younger adults, the older ones might feel insecure towards the younger adults or teenagers. Now, their behavioral characteristics, they're more disciplined. When you ask them to do something, they do it, and you've got much more quiet in the classroom. They're more willing to struggle. They take the instructional process more seriously, definitely. They tend to be more honest with the teachers. If they don't understand something, they will tell you so. You don't have to start guessing. They come well prepared most of the times. We'll see a little bit about that later on. They avoid irrelevant questions, although many times they might think that the question is stupid, as they will tell you, because again, sometimes it's their low self-confidence that comes into the picture, and they think that their questions are not on target. They're more willing to cooperate with the teachers towards the achievement of the educational goals. Now, what are their views about the teaching process? And again, what have the studies shown? So, as you can see, starting with the skills, they believe that listening is the most difficult skill to acquire, followed by speaking. And writing and reading are not so difficult to them. They are more used to that because of their previous learning experiences, because of their work sometimes, but definitely most adults will tell you, I can't understand when people are speaking, and I can't speak. I don't know how to speak. And there are a lot of cases of adults who can actually write and read them at a fair level, but they can, what they want is to improve their speaking. Now, what do they consider the most difficult? Vocabulary or grammar? Grammar. Although they do have a sound knowledge of grammar, sounder knowledge of grammar in relation to the younger students, again, grammar, they believe that this is the most difficult thing to acquire. Now, what do they like in the classroom? So what are the most useful teaching methods for them? As you can see, they like work followed by role play, especially in ESP contexts. Role play, they love it. And of course, group work. Okay, individual tasks, it's down to a 17%. When I saw this study, actually it came as a surprise. I would think that adults would prefer individual tasks, but no, they like working with other people, especially, I believe, because they have been accustomed to working with other people in their work context, if they are working people. Now, we've seen some characteristics that adult learners have. How can we now link those characteristics to teaching practices? First of all, as we've said before, adults have accumulated life experience and they have established opinions, values, and beliefs about education. They know exactly what they want out of the teacher. So they tend to favor practical learning activities that enable them to draw on their prior skills and knowledge. So they come in with their own cultural view of, first of all, what a teacher should say and how a teacher will behave. This sometimes may be a problem for us because they might not have expected a certain kind of teaching, let's say, approach, and they might be critical of it. And they have a very clear view of what should happen in the classroom and how the English language should be taught, which might be also a problem if they have their set opinions about, yeah, we have to start conjugating verbs. If we don't conjugate verbs, how are we going to learn grammar, etc., etc., etc. Now, adults are intrinsically motivated, as we saw before. Learners increase their effort when motivated by a need, an interest, or a desire to learn. This is what we already know. They're also motivated by the relevance of the material to be addressed and learn better when material is related to their own needs and interests. Let me give you an example. I am now teaching in a private college, and I teach ESP. Whenever I try to do something more general as a topic for reading or for anything, they are not that interested, and they themselves have asked me to provide them with articles that have to do with their majors. So mostly that's what I do. Now, because of all of that, activities should first of all take advantage of adults' past experiences and connect them to the new learning. Make them feel that what they already know is valuable to the present teaching situation. Be practical with a clear purpose and relevant to important issues in the adults' lives. Encourage adults to engage in the immediate application of what they are learning. They need that. They need to see that what they actually hear in the classroom, see in the classroom, they have to be able to apply it. Now, adults learn best in a democratic, participatory, and collaborative environment. We saw that they favor a lot of group work. Now, therefore, they need to be actively involved in determining how and what they will learn, and they need active learning experiences. When I actually did a needs analysis in class of the new students that I've had this year, that's what I did. I was heading a direction that was not covering their needs. And just one short note about the needs analysis. It is very important, as we all know, in any educational context, but definitely for adults, it is even more important because they have very specific needs and the teacher must know them from day one in order to be able to adapt, let's say, the lesson to their needs and not include irrelevant material. Now, we should include time for activities that allow learners to get to know each other. Remember, they like group work. What about error correction? Well, it should be less patronizing. We don't want to discourage them, and it should also focus on the positive aspects of the progress made by the adult learners. It is very easy for them to be discouraged because of certain mistakes, and adults tend to be more strict with themselves when they make mistakes. Now, the problem with adults, as we said before, is that sometimes they might come in very, very tired. That, coupled with the worry about being the oldest person in a class, should lead to varied teaching methods and putting forth their valuable contribution. So they're quite tired. For one thing, we have to jungle a bit between practices in the classroom and involve them as much as possible so that they can stay alert. Now, adults want to know why they're learning something. And that means they're goal-oriented. On the other hand, they have concrete and immediate needs, so they are task or problem-centered rather than subject-centered. They're autonomous, self-directed, which makes them more self-reliant as learners, and they prefer to work at their own pace. On the other hand, they should not be overloaded, especially if we're talking about working adults that have families and all sorts of obligations. So they should not be overloaded, which means that we have to strike a balance between already mastered elements and new ones in each activity. Don't introduce too much at the same time. Let it sink in. Combine it with things they already know. Some other considerations for adults: more comprehensive grammar presentations and more detailed explanations than in the case of younger learners. Remember, they have a higher understanding of grammar and they find it very difficult. Different methods of review that focus on a quick review of a list of materials for individual study. They have to have some individual study. What about homework? Well, there are those adults who will ask you for homework because that's the way for them to feel they're learning something. However, there are those adults who might be willing to do some homework and they do want to have some individual work. However, they don't have the time to do it, which means that the teacher here has to accommodate accordingly. So many times when you teach an adult's class, you might have adults that come in with their homework done and even more than you have asked them to, and those who have not. And this you have to be a little bit flexible with. What about their assessment? Now, we have to actively involve them. Remember, we've already said how they like being actively involved in the learning process. So it should be the same with assessment. Self-assessment, peer assessment, very important with adults. For example, what you could do is have them create examination questions or write their own writing topics. Okay, not if the examination is an institutional one, but at least for a mock exam, or if the exam is just a quiz that they're doing just for you as a teacher to see where they are, why not have them create it themselves? Now, that's all I wanted to tell you about my experience with adult students and the data from the different studies. I believe that we have, these are my references, some of my references. Okay. We do have quite a bit of time. So why not go to some questions? You can type them in the chat because I can see the chat. Are there any questions? I'll be happy to answer them. How often do you suggest homework? Well, homework is the one thing, as I said, that you have to be definitely flexible with. To tell you the truth, it depends on the context. First of all, the institutional context. If the school or the university makes you assign homework, then you have to assign homework. But first of all, remember we talked about needs analysis. Look at your students. Look, see how much time they might have for homework, and give as much homework as you believe they would be able to handle. Because if they want to do it, but they don't have time to do it, and you have asked for things that they can't possibly have time to do, they might feel discouraged. On the other hand, if you feel that your students would not have any time for homework, and you do not have to give homework, it's not like a prerequisite from your institution, why not skip it altogether? However, because they need some individual study, you could guide them even individually as to how they could take advantage of their time at home to review certain things. If I check homework, well, yes, but the question is, do I always check homework? Well, the thing is, of course, I do have to check homework if I have assigned some. And the problem with adults is with those adults who have not had time to do it. And this is where you have to be strict if they did have time to do it and they didn't, so they didn't do the homework because of laziness, and lenient with those people who by definition would not have time to do it. But I always check it, and what I do is I pair up somebody who has done her homework with somebody who has not done the homework in order for them to help each other. Now, can you recommend a good book that combines ESP, Business English, and General English for Restarted? Well, if you find one, could you please recommend it? To tell you the truth, I've been working with adults for so many years. I use my own material in the sense that I have yet to find one good book that combines general English with business English, let alone other ESP content. What you can find is there are great books that are for adults, but they're more general English. And what they do is they include a little bit of everything, topic-wise. And there are then you've got the books for business English or the books for legal English, medical English, etc., etc. A combination is hard to find. So what I do, also because in the college where I work, we do have a platform so I can upload the material. I use mostly my own material, which comes a little bit of everything, a little bit from general, a little bit from ESP, depending. Now, sorry, I have to go back a bit because I missed a couple of questions. How do you respond and behave to adults who try to dominate the teaching process than just participate as a student? Yes, especially if they are older than the other students. They tend to do that. Well, instead of trying to control them, what I would do, to tell you the truth, I've never had that experience, thank God. But what I would do is actually make them my assistants. So they would be the teacher assistant. They would be happy with it. Other people would not, the other learners would not most probably be demotivated because that person would be older anyway. Now, if they are the same age and one of them is trying to dominate, well, I would do exactly as I would do with my younger learners. I would try to give the floor to other students and sometimes ignore. It's a bit of a strong verb. Let's say not really involve that one person. My friend Marusa, thank you. As an answer to your question, students can also use their own materials in their work context. Ms. Pavli is an expert in teaching adults and a good friend of mine, and I thank her for her contribution. Now, another comment that I see here, adults should never be overloaded. I can't see the whole comment. They have a say on how they want to be taught, but they're discouraged very easily. Yes. So we need to keep a balance with everything and focus with each one of them separately. Yes. I can't see the whole name. I only see the first name, Ariadne. Thank you for your contribution. Yes, it is. That's what we've been talking about. And actually, that's why it is a challenge, teaching adults. But on the other hand, it is a manageable challenge. Now, another question, what happens if they are older than the teacher and think they know better? An excellent question. Again, I can't see the full name. Well, I've had that. At the beginning of my career, actually, I had two students that were 20 years older than I was at the time. I was lucky enough that they needed so much motivation from me, and they were in a class with younger adults, that they regarded me as the teacher, irrespective of my age. So I've never had the experience of having students older than I am and trying to dominate the teacher. However, adults, be it older or younger than the teacher, know what they want from the teacher. They come in with preconceptions. So the thing is that they will have demands, sometimes impossible demands from the teacher. That is the challenge part. And that is why I firmly believe that a novice teacher would have a hard time dealing with adults, especially if they are large classrooms. A teacher does need some experience in order to be able to handle potential problems that might arise. We don't have a lot of time. I'm just going to finish with a comment that I see here from Fotini. Sorry, I don't see the full name. In my experience, adults learn faster and become more proficient when they need to learn English for business or certification. Yes, I totally agree. So thank you all for your questions. First of all, for being here on a Sunday afternoon, for your questions, for your participation. I wish you all the best for the rest of the Sunday, and have a nice week from tomorrow on. Bye-bye.